Hey there folks, welcome to the second artist interview on this channel. If you haven't seen the first interview, do check it out. It was with David Perriman aka Infernal Brush, who won the Slayer Sword in Germany earlier this year. In this interview, I'm talking to Erkka Marttio, who is also a Golden Demon winner in the Diorama category. My name is Adib. I've been sculpting and painting professionally for over 15 years in the high-end collectible space, but I'm relatively new in the miniature model making scene. Join me in my journey as I deep dive into this rabbit hole. Welcome Erkka to the channel. Thanks for your time again. Oh, if you don't know who Erkka is, he recently won 2 gold in 2 categories in Golden Demon, recently in Essen. I'll let Erkka introduce himself and talk a bit about how did you get into miniature painting.
All right. So yes, thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored to have this sort of a interview. And so I'm Erkka Marttio, and I'm a Finnish miniature painter. And I've been into the hobby for quite a long time. It's difficult to say like exact years. I think like many of us painters, I got into it as a kid first. I'm 30 years old now, so like around, I'd say probably 20 years ago or something like that. And then I've been on and off with the hobby ever since. And I think as an adult, I started painting again in 2018. And more seriously about this sort of like display miniatures, display painting stuff. I think it was around 2020 or something like that when I got started with that stuff.
When I first saw your work, in fact, I came across your work because of Golden Demon. So one of the reasons I do this kind of interview is getting to know more, talented painters in the community, and also bringing along my viewers with me to, get into this world, get to know the community, get to know the painters who are, winning competitions.
Yeah, I think for me it was very, very much like, I feel like for a lot of us, like people who paint fantasy display miniatures, that it was through Warhammer and doing gaming, like painting for gaming basically. Yep. Before that. And then at some point I just realized that the painting is more my thing rather than the gaming, and I can just paint whatever I want and paint figures that I actually like rather than having to paint full armies of something. Yeah. And that's where the kind of display painting stuff started for me.
Like all of us, we all have a pile of shame that we always, like all these models we buy but never get the time to paint. So then when I got introduced to Warhammer through my friend, I really dove into it, and it opened up a whole new world for me. And that's kind of what led me to start this channel actually, because when I started to paint the miniatures, I realized how different it is from the traditional larger scale statues that I'm myself used to. I really appreciate the intricacies of these miniatures that we paint.
Yeah, it's kind of similar, but maybe the opposite for me, because I got into it through Warhammer, but then nowadays I also do not as large scale, like 1/6 or something like that, but I paint quite a lot of busts and like larger scale figures, 1/10, 1/12. So, I've gotten into the kind of larger scale after Warhammer, whereas for you it's the opposite way. Yeah.
For me, Warhammer was the entry point, because when I started to learn about the lore of Warhammer, it kind of really intrigued me, especially how old this IP is. It's been around for over 30 years. So when I first saw the models, I didn't know the characters, right? But the models themselves were interesting, and they made me think like, oh cool, it would be nice to paint them. The intricacies that got me into it. And then as I painted more and more, I realized like it's a whole new thing to learn, and it got me excited as an artist.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of like stuff surrounding Warhammer that's interesting kind of material to also take from when you're painting. I think, for example, this year with the Golden Demon, the diorama that I made, it's kind of like, I think I wrote on Instagram or something that it's kind of like a love letter to what first made me, fall in love with Warhammer as a kid. It was my first painted miniatures have been Space Wolves and Tyranids. So it's, combining that and maybe kind of trying to actually produce what I imagined as a kid. Like the miniatures I painted back then, they're like not so well painted, of course, and now, but that's how I always imagined them, in these kind of epic battles, epic situations, and trying to finally kind of realize that vision now as an adult. So yeah, it's the background stuff can definitely be a cool inspiration for a lot of things when painting.
Yeah, and when you posted that Instagram post, I was like, really, wow, he's been into this for so long. So I had assumed that, oh, you've been painting for a long time. But then when you mentioned that, actually you started to get serious in 2018 or 2020, you mentioned. So
yes.
To be honest, out of all the entries, I mean, there were really great entries this year. And I think yours was my favorite in terms of, like, I thought that's the best one of all the gold winners that was there.
Thank you. I'm humbled to hear that. It's weird for me to hear that in some way from people, but yeah, thank you. I think there were lots of really fantastic works in the competition, and the Slayer Sword winner was like, it was insane. Just seeing that piece by Dave, it was just so good. So happy for that.
Yeah, we managed to interview him when we were there. So yeah, it was our first interview.
Yeah, I saw your interview.
Actually, to give a bit of context, I was supposed to be there for participating for the event as well, and I created a mini to submit in the diorama category, but unfortunately I couldn't make it because I couldn't get the visa in time. But my wife was there, and she's the one who helped me to get the recording for the interview with David. Yeah. So because my background is also like doing large scale diorama, so when I first started to consider entering competitions, like diorama was the category I naturally kind of leaned towards. And then when I saw the winners and the entries, I was like, good thing I didn't make it. I wouldn't even get commended. It's the level of competition is so good, and especially your work. Yeah, so I was really impressed.
I think it's getting really high, the level in Golden Demon. I don't know how to feel about it, honestly. Of course, it's really cool to see so amazing pieces and so many of them, but at the same time, I feel like it's getting to the point where it can be a little bit discouraging for newer people getting into display painting and competition painting. So I don't know. Luckily, I'm not the one who has to solve this problem.
With every Golden Demon, there seems to be, even with the one earlier this year in Adepticon, like there seems to be always people who have their own favorites, and they have a lot of comments about, this should have won or this shouldn't have won. So like for me, of course, Golden Demon has its own panel of judges, and they have their own reasons for every award they give. So even this year, there were some pieces that people thought were not maybe didn't deserve it for any reason. So I think there is still some hope there for people who believe that it's not just about the technical aspect of painting. There needs to be some creativity in the pieces that are awarded and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one important thing that I feel is good to remember, particularly in Golden Demon, is kind of the Warhammer IP and trying to do something that's kind of within the Warhammer IP. I think it's valued quite highly in the competition. But yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of room for creativity and different kinds of techniques. I don't think there's like a favored style or anything like that really when it comes to Golden Demon. When you look at the winners, there are several different types of painting that seems to get awarded, and I think that's for creativity. It's good that there's no certain specific thing that they're looking for, because I think that could easily shoehorn us into just trying to do things that way to please the judges. Whereas I don't think that's the best way forward when you think of the kind of art form as a whole.
Yeah,
I think it's good to encourage people to try some new things as well.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what David said during his interview, is that paint for the love of it. Don't paint for winning anything. So because if you enjoy doing, if you pick the mini that you love, then the work itself will show the effort you put in.
Yeah. That's true. Of course, when you do like really huge projects like dioramas or something like that, there's bound to be some moments where it can get a little bit boring, and then you just have to find some ways to kind of push through and get it done, and kind of try to motivate yourself to finish the piece, to see the kind of vision realized in the end.
What, of course, you mentioned that it was kind of an homage to the Space Wolves versus Tyranids that you did as the first piece that you ever painted. But like, what made you choose this concept, or how did you come up with the concept, and why did you pick those specific models to modify to make your diorama?
I think immediately, so there's Space Marine there for context. It's the Black Templar, some sort of like commemorative model, Bayard's Revenge, which is like a Black Templar with his sword on top of an orc. And immediately when I saw that model, because I've always loved duels, and I'm always like, when I see, that's like my favorite category been since childhood in Golden Demon, and every time I see models, I kind of look at them through the eyes of, could this work in some sort of a cool duel? And that was immediately like, it brought to mind the kind of scene from Lord of the Rings where there's Gandalf and Balrog falling down. Gandalf is on top of Balrog, and so I got the idea that, okay, with this model, maybe if I swap the orc, I could do some like really epic that he's in air with something. And then it was just like a matter of thinking, what could be a model suitable for it? What model could I convert to work nicely, so that there's room for the Space Marine there, and Hive Tyrant seemed like a quite logical option, about like a good sized figure for that, and not super difficult to convert because it's one of the kind of older kits that it's still got ball joints and everything like that. So it wasn't like an impossible amount of conversion to get it to work for the pose. And yeah, that's where the idea originally came from. And then after Manchester Golden Demon, I got commended, and I got really close to getting a trophy, and I just felt like super motivated to try and come up with something that would be different level compared to what I've done before, something really epic, really cool. And actually, I think I got the idea on the like plane back home to Finland. I was thinking throughout the plane trip of what I could do, and yeah, I thought of making it like a Space Wolf and a Tyrannid, and then I got the idea of doing it as a sea wolf to match the ocean. One of the difficulties there was that I was thinking how to have the models be in air without having to have a backdrop, because I felt that it wouldn't work with a backdrop. Then I got the idea that, hey, maybe they could be like smashing into the ocean and sea wolves and so on. So it's a lot of thinking work before you actually start doing anything. I think that's one important thing that I try to give a lot of time for. Bigger projects, that I really do think about them quite a lot before I even get started with it, to have some sort of solid idea. And yeah, there was also like a White Dwarf story about the sea wolf leaping to his death to slay some sort of Tyrannid monster, so that kind of matched perfectly with the diorama idea. So yeah, that's cool. That's the basics. There were some elements under the water level, basically. So those elements, are they referencing to something? No, nothing specific, I would say. It's like some like Tyrannid bits from the Battle for Macragge box, which is like a really, really old Warhammer starting box. And then it's a lot of sculpted detail that I've added there. I just wanted to make it look like an ocean floor that's basically infested with Tyrannid tentacles and stuff like that, to give it this sort of a feeling that no matter what happens between the Space Wolf and the Tyrannid, there's some sort of trouble waiting when they go to the bottom of the ocean, because it's all Tyrannids there. And with the escape pod, I kind of tried to give a hint that maybe there's been some sort of a battle above. Maybe the Space Wolf has jumped from somewhere on top of the Tyrannid or something like that. But yeah, nothing specific that I tried to do. That's a nice touch. It adds more story to the battle itself. Yeah. So the fact that you thought about it makes it even more interesting. Yeah. As I said, I think it's with these sorts of projects, it's really important to try to just, at least for me, to try to think of all the different cool things that you could do with it. And sometimes also you might have some cool ideas that you cannot do or won't work for the project, and you have to ditch them, but try to include also many of the ideas that you can have.
You did a lot of test pours for the resin before you did the actual one. Any specific technique or thing you're proud of for that piece that you did?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with the results of the resin pour, particularly because there's honestly not that much information out there for doing big pours like that. I think what many people might not realize is that it's such a deep pour, and the cylinder itself is quite small. It's like an 8 centimeter cylinder. That there's very little like surface area for the heat to get out of the resin, basically, which makes it a really risky kind of a shape for resin pours, because you can easily get problems with it heating up too much and then drying too quickly and exploding or cracking and this sort of stuff. So I had to do quite a lot of just through trial and error. Of course, I tried to ask also people who've been doing this sort of stuff, and also reaching out like outside of our hobby, so or outside of the figure painting scene, asking people who actually like work with epoxy resin all the time, doing different kind of big projects with it. Yeah, I was able to then get the result that I wanted. But yeah, it took a lot of trial and error. It was 4 practice pours, if I remember. Yeah, 3.5, I'd say, 3 proper ones and 1 smaller one, and then I did the final pour, and it worked out nicely.
Having worked with resin before, I know that had the issues with like how bubbles can form as well. Your pour was so clean, there's almost no imperfection that you could spot.
There are some. Because I don't feel it's like such a deep sea kind of scene. I felt that the water is in motion, that it would look unnatural if there was no bubbles. Mm-hmm. But I knew that either way there'll be some bubbles unless I use like what's it called, like a pressure chamber. But that would have been so expensive to get one large enough for the project. So I thought that I'd try to minimize the bubbles and kind of maybe control a little bit how much bubbles I would get. And I'm really happy with the result, because most of the bubbles ended up being quite close to the surface of the water, which works really nicely for what's actually happening in the diorama also. But it's not perfect. I think lots of people keep telling me that, how do you get it so perfect? It's not perfect, but I'm glad it reads as good enough that other people think it's perfect. Yourself, you always know and see the mistakes, of course.
And speaking of gold, actually, the other gold that you won was in the Kill Team category for 40K. So can you share a bit about the concept of that piece?
Yeah, sure. So that's actually an older piece. That's why maybe it's also easier for me maybe to talk a little bit about the newer piece, because I have to think back, because I did that for the Manchester Golden Demon last year, where it got commended, because Warhammer deals a lot with war, basically, and it's not always such like a epic and glorious thing as we portray it as often in the hobby. And I wanted to do something that's maybe a bit more melancholic, a bit more like somber, and kind of show a different side to war also. And so I had this idea of doing this sort of a scene of Krieg guardsmen around this some sort of like a pit of bodies. I kind of wanted to leave it for the imagination of the viewer to decide where the bodies are from. Are they like fallen guardsmen whose equipment has been stripped, or are they some sort of victims to some sort of radiation or plague or whatever? But I just wanted to have this sort of like a calm post-battle scene of these Kriegsmen having some sort of kind of last rites around this pit of bodies, basically. Kind of like a funeral, but Krieg enough.
I like the little touch of the little rat in the middle, which not everybody notices at first.
Yeah, it's a fun detail. In hindsight, I think it's a little bit too like right in the center. Now I would probably leave it out or put it somewhere else. But yeah, it's a fun little detail. And actually, it's a little Easter egg, because with every piece that I've done for Golden Demon, because it's I've been doing it as a kid, and I have lots of the kits left that I used when I was younger. So I always try to hide in every piece that I do a little piece from some kit that I've had since I was a kid. So actually, in the bottom of the grave, there's this two-headed rat, which is like from a really old Skaven plastic kit that I've had for a long time. Or in the Tyrannid Space Wolf diorama, there's like an Auspex scanner in the bottom of the ocean. That's also like from something I got as a 10-year-old or something. So I try to have these sort of little Easter eggs there, just for me mainly. But
you also mentioned that it got commended last year. So when you resubmitted, did you change anything, or it was pretty much the same?
Pretty much the same. So I only made some small changes that were more kind of things that were bothering me. There's the middle Kriegsman is holding a banner, and some of the painting on the backside of the arm wasn't as neat, because that was the first one of them I painted, because the other four Kriegsmen I painted together, but the bannerman I painted on its own. So I felt like it wasn't quite as neat as the other four. So I made some small changes to that, but maybe only like, I'd say 2 or 3 hours. So pretty much nothing. And that was before I took it to Contrast, which is like a painting competition in Poland that happened right after the Manchester Golden Demon. But specifically for this Golden Demon, I didn't really do any changes to it. I was actually doing another 40k squad, but I didn't have the time or the energy to finish that one. So then as a backup, I decided, okay, I'll take the Krieg again, and I guess it was a good choice in the end. Worked out.
You mentioned you were quite surprised to win the gold, but do you have any idea like what could have go from commended to gold? Because I know that people are very reluctant to resubmit a piece when it doesn't get any medals, but yours went from commended to gold. So if there's anything that you think may have affected the difference in outcome.
I think with like top 3 competitions like Golden Demon, I think one thing that can affect outcome always is who else is, what kind of other, not necessarily who else, but what other pieces are in the category with you. So that's one major thing that's different. None of the pieces that won last year were there this year. And then also I think, or like we know that the judges were different this year than last year. So I think that must have played a part also. So yeah, I think those were the major things, judging and the rest of the competition. But yeah, I was really surprised, because there were some really amazing squads in that category that would have definitely deserved to win as well.
Yeah, and speaking of like resubmitting work, what advice would you give to someone who has never participated or maybe never have won a medal before? What advice would you give them when it comes to trying to get a Golden Demon?
With like a new piece, or with the same piece that they've done?
It could be anything, like any kind of advice, whether it's new or a resubmission, or what in your opinion is something that will have a good chance of winning, and if the artist themselves is lacking in terms of certain skills, what should they develop on?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a really kind of cliche thing to say, and we already mentioned it here, but of course pick something that you're willing to put the time and effort needed for. So these are pieces that often take a very long time to do, and it's difficult to do something for a very long time if you're not somehow passionate about it. So try to really pick a model or a scene or a diorama idea that you're super excited about and really want to actually invest the time into, no matter the outcome in the end and the results. And then just like trying to do everything to the best of your ability. I don't think there's much like corners that you can cut when the level is as high as it is in Golden Demon. I think you have to just put your best foot forward and try to do the best you can with every part of the model. And I think that's something that's maybe at least historically been a thing in Golden Demon, that they really value everything being done like meticulously to the same level. Whereas I think that in other competitions and even personally, I feel like there's some artistic merit to actually not doing everything to the same level. But in Golden Demon, that seems to one of the kind of key things. There's no areas where you've maybe been a bit lazy, something like that. Doing your best and putting in the hours needed and picking a project that you actually want to put the hours into it.
Yeah, I think it's also something what David said is that, you know, looking at every part of the model and giving equal attention is something that is valued at Golden Demon. So
yeah, it's different to I'd say like traditional like 2D art or many other competitions, because at the same time that could be a tool to draw focus. You could leave areas less refined to draw focus on something that's more refined. But at least so far, it seems that in Golden Demon it is valued that you refine everything to your best abilities.
So we've been talking about 40K for some time, I mean mostly, but what are the other kind of miniatures that you've worked on that you really enjoyed and enjoy working on?
Yeah, so I've been painting quite a lot of like busts and larger scale models, or like figures, not scale models. I think I enjoy quite a lot of like different types of topics compared to Warhammer 40K. I think I like kind of like human topics, sort of like mundane seeming, or just like human topics.
Non-fantasy or non-sci-fi, just normal people kind of.
Yeah. That's something I enjoy, and I enjoy trying out painting in different styles. I've done like not only fantasy stuff, but I've also done like historic busts, which I've really liked. I've tried to some work that's maybe a bit more less refined, and some work that's like super refined, or trying different kinds of effects. I think it's like the larger scale figures and the other types of figures than Warhammer are more like, for me, it's easier to play around and try different things with those. And that's actually something that also, like after Golden Demon, I've really been kind of waiting to get to do something different again, because it obviously took the best part of my like painting time over the last, I'd say 1.5 years to prepare for the Golden Demon. So now I'm happy to get to do some other types of projects for a while as well.
For like, of course, miniature painting is your passion, and is there any other kind of art or anything else that you'd like to dabble in other than miniatures?
I think right now this feels like it's it's enough. Sculpting is definitely something that I'm interested in and would like to kind of dabble in a little bit more, but it's not something that I've like concretely done much of yet, apart from only like small stuff for conversions and this sort of stuff. But it would be cool to kind of try out to sculpt maybe a bust or something like that at some point.
I see. For us, it all starts out as a hobby, and some end up doing it full time. Some end up doing it, just as a hobby. And maybe sometimes it is like, because I personally have done it as a profession, I still see the value or the romanticism of just doing it as a hobby and not worry about commercializing whatever you do. So it's kind of freeing in some ways to be able to just do it as a hobby and just enjoy the process of painting or sculpting and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't think if I was doing this professionally, I don't think I would have had the chance to, for example, do like, okay, for this 1 year, I will basically post nothing on social media and I will just focus on Golden Demon projects or something like that. So that's a plus side definitely for doing it as a hobby.
This is something I'm trying out with all the interviewees that I'm going to be having on my channel. It's a segment called Bash My Work. I will show you my work, and then I want you to critique and tell me, what's wrong with it or what can be improved. It's also a way of kind of allowing me as an artist to improve, and also the viewers to see the thought process of how a piece can be taken from to the next level, basically.
So I think first of a really positive thing when thinking about Golden Demon is that it's something that's actually like based on an artwork. It's Angron versus Lion. It's like a really iconic duo, and overall, maybe something that I'd pay attention to a bit more is the composition of the piece. I think I like the ruins that Angron is kind of coming through, but I feel that Lion gets lost a little bit. I think he's quite darkly colored, and in a lot of the views he's just kind of there in the front and easy to kind of miss because you have such a strong focus on Angron, who has much brighter colors and a stronger focus on him in general, also through the terrain that's around him. So doing something to pull more attention towards Lion as well in this picture, whether it be through the use of color or maybe some sort of like work with light could work, or then just the composition, maybe placing them a little bit differently, trying to maybe make it a little bit more tight, so that there's not so much kind of empty, this sort of like dead space around Lion. Because right now there's some like empty space around him. Overall, I think the paintwork looks nice. I think, of course, it's something that, you know, in some areas probably could be pushed further, I think, for this piece, but also for like any of us painters, myself included. I think it's always something that we can try to improve. Like for diorama, having a strong focus, strong composition is really then just like pushing the painting to be as refined, as good as you can.
Thanks for the feedback. It's a bit encouraging and also frustrating. He's working on new things, so every time you finish something and you move on to the next thing, you realize like the previous one, there's so many things you can do better. So it's encouraging that, oh, okay, it's great, I'm improving, but then at the same time you feel like, oh, I could have made it better, I should have done better.
But that's how it is, because it's like all this, like for example, Golden Demon. This was my third time taking part now, and previous 2 times I've kind of left, I don't know, disappointed a little bit, of course, because even though you shouldn't go there expecting to win, but of course you're always hopeful at a certain point, at least, to get some recognition for the work that you've been doing. But then you just have to kind of try to get out of it what you can and what kind of things you can change for the next piece. And I think it's a very good sign as an artist that you don't like your old work that much anymore, because it's telling that you've been improving and you've developed and you're able to see the flaws. And some of the flaws are maybe something that you can change on that piece, and then some flaws are just things that are easier to just, I don't know, be aware of and then take into the next piece that you are going to do. Because like my first duel that I took to Golden Demon also had way too, like, the base was too big. It wasn't tight enough. It was basically 2 models looking at each other like this, which is a classic kind of, I think, thing where people can make a mistake with duels. There was no like proper interaction between the characters. Spent time doing that project. I like the project in some sort of way still, but I also learned a lot of lessons that I then took into the next projects after that.
And speaking of projects, what's the next thing that you are looking forward to, or is there any like events you're looking forward to attending?
Yeah, so I'm going to Monte San Savino for the first time now this year. It's in a couple of weeks, in mid-November.
Yeah.
I think I'm going there mostly just to have fun and meet friends, and we have a big, but some like around 8 people, I think, leaving from Finland to go there. So I'm really, really excited for that. I don't think I'm going to be doing anything super like ambitious for that, because after Golden Demon, I've just been mostly wanting to focus on other things for a while. I might paint some small bust or something like that, to have something new to take there. But mostly it's just to go there and have fun. Yeah, after that, I think next year there's a couple of events that I'm looking forward to go to. There's the World Model Expo for the first time in a couple of years in Paris. Hopefully do something for that. And then most likely also Golden Demon next year. I've only been traveling to European events myself, and I think the miniature painting scene in Europe is really high level. So I think a lot of the really good competitions happen to also be in Europe, which is good for us Europeans. Then the Scale Model Challenge in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, that's in October. That's something I've gone to before. It's a really wonderful event run by this wonderful people. It's a big event. There's a lot of traders and a lot of models there for show, and also, at least from what I've heard, because I've not been in Monty, but quite a lot of also scale models. And there's a lot of scale modelers in Finland, so it's nice to also those folks as well. So I think those are the main two ones outside of Golden Demon that I always look forward to, but there's a lot of others. Oh, and Contrast in Poland is one event that I really enjoyed. I went there in 2023, and I'd highly recommend that one to anybody as well. It's in Warsaw in the beginning of June, I believe, every year. A really lovely event, and the Polish community is really wonderful. So big shout out to that as well. Yeah, and there's much more. In the UK they have MPO and Fen Model Show, and yeah, there's a ton. So, and I think in the US also there's been more and more of these kind of open competitions now, which I really highly recommend. I think it's good to see that the miniature painting competitions is not just Golden Demon. It can be done in different kinds of ways also.
Yeah, you also get to see a diverse kind of range of models in these kind of competitions, where it's not just Warhammer, but everything else. So, which brings us to the final question, which is, what is the one thing that you would want people to know about you or your work?
I don't know. I just hope that the kind of passion I have for painting shows through the work, and I hope people can feel that when they look at things that have been painted, are able to kind of experience some of the same things that I felt when doing those people's experience. I don't know, it sounds so pretentious. Yeah. So, sure,
it's true, like we do what we do because we just love the craft, but at the same time, whatever we do is based on our experiences, so it shows through in some ways, whether we want to or not. So
I'd say that I hope that people are able to kind of see passion I have for this stuff, and hopefully get something out of it, something positive, inspiration or ideas or something along those lines. Yeah.
All right, that's great. Again, thanks for coming on and giving your valuable time and sharing your experiences with us. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.